Yes.
Are there any questions regarding the upcoming meetings? And the very next one would be the annual meeting for City BOCES, which is at 6 o'clock. The link, Mrs. Perry, did we get the link already, or is that coming again? Or
Robin, it's included in the letter from BOCES, and I'll send the link out tomorrow separately.
All right, thank
you. It'll be in an email.
Thank you, Mrs. Perry.
Yeah, I would, Ms. Griffin, I actually went on there today to play, because it's a PDF, it doesn't link. You would have to type it in if you're using it from there. So look for the link from Ms. Perry tomorrow. That'll be more live and much simpler with one click.
Okay, user friendly for us is always good.
I figured I would share that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to point out that one of the items that's coming up for us, we are at that time of year again where we're going to be doing the evaluation of the superintendent. So having conversed with Brian, you can expect to see materials on 4/19. And then that same day on 4/19, the tool is online. You will probably need to use your Chromebook to do it, because as I recall last year, it didn't work well if we weren't using a Chromebook to complete the forms. And then 1 week, I need it completed by April 26th. So you'll get all that. That'll all be forwarded to you, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. If there's no questions with regard to any of these items, I turn this meeting over to the superintendent.
Well, good evening, everyone. Happy April 13th. What a beautiful day out there. I did say, I caught my attention today. I heard snow in the forecast, but then I realized it's in the North Country and far enough away. So I was happy to see that. So we're getting a little brisk toward the end of the week, but no snow based on that. So I was thrilled to hear that. One, I'd like to start, just as I always do, I want to acknowledge our staff and our students and our families. We are literally coming into the home stretch now. The third quarter is ending this Friday, and everybody's just been working so hard. I've had the opportunity, and I'm trying to get into every building each week and walk through and get a real feel for things, and kids are working hard. So appreciate that. And I want to extend that publicly. And I also took the opportunity to really look back all the way back to last June. I was taking a look in preparation for my evaluation that Ms. Griffin talked about, to really look at the story since last June, every report at every board meeting. And it is truly amazing from where we were last spring to where we are now. It's really interesting when you start to look at all those reports and all of the efforts and energy and commitment behind all of that from all of our stakeholders. It's just absolutely amazing from every aspect of the Fulton City School District organization, every employee who works here, to every one of our families and community members who are involved with our schools. So thank you. It was pretty amazing. It really was eye-opening. Until you look at a snapshot like that, you don't recognize that. So with that, we're gonna get into the budget process a little bit. Good news is that the budget was finally approved in New York State. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But tonight, first, we're gonna be hearing from the Fulton Public Library and the 21-22 proposition, not the 2021 proposition. So that's a little bit of an adjustment on the agenda there. But it's the 21-22 proposition. So if the representatives from the library would like to share, we look forward to having you as part of our propositions coming up in May. And with that, if you could, you have the floor.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Caroline Chatterton. I'm the director of the Fulton Public Library. I just wanted to thank you all for having me here today to just speak very briefly. I will try not to take up too much of your time. Joining me are trustees Jackie Havener, Sarah Fay, and Carolyn Mosier. We'd be happy to try and answer any questions you might have regarding the library budget or services. So there were many factors that informed our decision. Some of them include personnel costs, primarily health insurance and minimum wage increases, COVID-19 cleaning, sanitization, and PPE costs, library system consortium fee increases, and collection needs due to ongoing weeding processes. We use the appropriated funds for the day-to-day operations of the library, maintaining our collection of books and audiobooks and DVDs and more. multimedia, all sorts of fun things, and providing fun educational programming for the community. To supplement the tax levy funds with grants that help in many ways. We're always applying for grants, as I'm sure that you guys are. So now I'll just take a minute and read the library tax proposition, and then if anyone has any questions, I promised I'd keep this short and sweet. Shall the Fulton Public Library Board of Trustees be authorized to levy and collect an annual tax separate and apart from the annual school district budget in the amount of $447,384 for the continuing support and maintenance of the Fulton Public Library, with this appropriated amount to be the annual appropriation until thereafter modified by a future vote by the taxpayers of the Fulton City School District. Don't mind the zebra finches in the background. They wanted to chip in too. They wanted their 2 cents to go into that. Are there any questions for me or any of the library trustees that are here today?
I would just like to ask out of curiosity, during COVID, did you see your usage go up, down, or remain about the same?
We saw the physical circulation of items decrease, but we increased access to our electronic resources, and we saw that almost go up 50%, the use of our ebooks and our e-audiobooks and all of those resources.
Thank you. I was curious, which is good news that people were reading.
Yes.
Anyone
Any
else?
other questions or, yeah?
If the public had questions, do they contact the library directly then?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you have a phone number posted or on a website for the public to find, or how would they know how to contact you?
Yeah, so they could go right to our website, and it has all of our contact information. We also have a contact built into the website if they prefer to just like an email message that way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great question, Mr. Cordone. That was they would have either come to us or we would have passed it on. So that was great. Thank you. That was a good one. All righty. Any other questions for our library team? Thank you. Thank you for all you do. I know that we have kids that go there, and hopefully they'll be going more and more as we move forward. And I know that we've worked with you in the past, and you have all the great technology there, and you provide access to our kids well after school. So thank you.
Yes, we really appreciate working with the school district, and you guys have been very generous with provide us with technology that maybe couldn't afford out of our own budget. So that is also a huge help to us. And mark your calendars. We're planning to reopen the library building on May 3rd.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much. Good luck.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Next on our agenda this evening, another celebration I wanted to share. I know I thanked everybody for just amazing what we've accomplished and continue to accomplish as we continue to evolve. But our parent university, it kicked off last night, and I heard some real good things going on today. Ms. Geithner, if you'd like to comment, please.
Yes, thank you. Just a very brief update. If you don't mind, I'll share what our site looks like and give you an update from Liz Tiffany, who is right now just finishing up one of the parent workshops. And what I hope you can see right now is our website for Parent University. And this gives a list of all of the workshops that were held over the past 2 days. And then you can see we just finished the social emotional learning session, and there's an upcoming session at 7 o'clock. It's never too late for families to join. They can log in at any time. These are also recorded. So if you could navigate our website, you can see that there's on-demand presentations, which are recorded, the live workshops, which are obviously synchronous at that time, along with information about what resources are in our community, our request for information form. So if families have questions or need resources, they can fill out the form that will be located at this link. Coming soon, you'll be able to check a calendar for events going on around town, not just school district events, but other community partner sponsored events. There will be a Fulton in Focus newsletter from our community school and a Fulton in Focus podcast coming from our community school. So those are all there. But tonight we really want to encourage families, if you haven't participated, we had a great session at 5 o'clock tonight where families made their own meal, and all of the ingredients for that meal were delivered to the homes of the families who registered. And then we had a facilitator from Oswego County Opportunities teaching them how to complete that recipe, and then it turned into dinner for the family for tonight. Mr. Perry, one of our teachers at the high school, ran a trivia night. Kate Guinea from City BOCES did some information for families and caregivers around social emotional learning at home. Tomorrow, you can look forward to some yoga that's open to the whole family. There's a make your own snack and activity sponsored by Cornell Cooperative Extension. That does require pre-registration, but it's not too late. And again, those ingredients will be delivered to you at home so that you can make that recipe with your family. And we just are really encouraging everybody to take a look at what's out there. Thursday, we'll do more sessions, including a featured session with the author of Brambleheart. And on Friday, again, another Make Your Own Family Dinner is a highlight, along with a live concert. So families can tune in and listen to family-friendly music by Jared Campbell on Friday evening. Lots of informational sessions and lots of interactive sessions for families to do together and caregivers to do on their own, maybe after the kids go to bed. And on Saturday, again, a full day of activities culminating at 1 o'clock. We'll be drawing prize winners from our raffles, and to be entered into the raffle, you fill out these attendance and feedback forms and participate in sessions, and you'll earn points toward being in that raffle. So strongly encourage people to participate and learn and have some fun along the way. And thank you to Liz Tiffany and Monica Kyle and Cami Stores from our community school, and all of the agency partners, staff members, directors, coaches, teachers who've stepped up to help make this such a great event, and to our families for participating, and our community partners for always supporting us in this collaborative work.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Geithner. We felt like one of the things we made a commitment to this week was making a plug every time we had the opportunity for Parent University to really make sure that everybody in our community is aware. So there's a lot of information, as Jerry said, on our website. And thank you to everyone. And I want to echo that. Thank you it's very professional looking. When you take a look, there's some great information there. And what's great is it's there for future reference. And I think that's that, if anything positive came out of this in Parent University in the past, it was in person and kind of was that day. Now we have something that we can put in our as a reference and available for our parents and community ongoing. So thank you, Jerry, and your team. Next up, Dom, if you could put the budget up on the screen, please, for me. I'm going to ask you to drive for me so then I can actually see the screen. If not, I can't see anybody, and everybody knows that I do much better. So the 21-22 budget, we received, it was late this year, it came out right around, I believe it was April 4th or 5th, we got the budget, and we really had the opportunity to go through things. So I'm going to try to keep things a little narrower. Last year we had a 40 or 50 page budget presentation. It's much shorter. That's one of the requests. We're trying to keep things a bit more streamlined. So Dom, if you could go on to the next slide, please. Our meeting agenda this evening will be the latest information on the federal stimulus revenues and the New York State budget. We're going to share with you a draft 21-22 draft budget proposal for consideration and discussion. And there will be some discussion. There is a bit of a gap that we want to have a discussion about. And there are a couple different ways that we can look at that. Next steps would be then tonight's meeting, and then we have a special budget committee meeting, or we have a budget committee meeting. What that is, that's the stakeholder group of stake that we formed this year. That's on the 15th, so that's scheduled for this Thursday night. We would come back at a special board meeting to ratify, make any final discussions and ratify the budget on April 20th. And then that would move us into the next phase, which is starting to put together our budget newsletters and all of the materials that are required as part of the process leading up to public presentation for vote in the latter part of May. I believe it's May 19th. Next slide, please. Always a good reminder that everything that we do, every decision that we make, it comes back to focusing on allowing us to move towards fruition of our mission and our vision in the district. And I won't read those to you, but they are at the center of everything that we do. Next slide, please. Also, something we always keep in mind in everything that we do is our beliefs and our guiding principles. And, you know, when you reflect on each one of these, I think Fulton does a very good job in each of these areas. And, you know, that fourth one on the right always is something that we're being looked at, that we are fiscally responsible through using sound and efficient practices in all matters. And I really think we do that, you know, over time. So I think this board does a great job. When you look historically, and you'll see some historical documents this evening, you can see 9 years of just great work by Fulton boards of education and administrations and teams with the schools, which have brought us to this point this evening. Next slide, please. Always a reminder is our strategic coherence plan, which is really our rudder. It's really about making sure that there's collective commitment. I really look at this slide and how do we ensure clear purpose, practices, and shared commitment, and really gets down to making sure we have a clear focused direction, developing a collaborative culture, deepening our learning, and then securing accountability. And that wheel just is ongoing. And at the previous Board of Education meeting, we talked about some of the successes that we've already had and the foundations that have been laid through this strategic coherence plan. So thank you again to the board for supporting that endeavor. And as we continue to move that, I believe we're in our second year of that plan. Next slide, please. This is just the strategic intents that go with coherence in each of the 6 areas, and I will not read them, but those are the strategic intents or goals in each of the areas, from leadership, literacy, instruction, social, emotional, developmental health, family engagement, innovation. None of those stand alone. Together is what creates that collective coherence and collective commitment. Next slide. These are the budget parameters that the Board of Education on December 15th, 2020, we met and went through. So every decision that we've been making and as part of this evening's proposal are related to the budget parameters and come back to these 6 areas. And these are all associated with our strategic coherence plan as well. So we're trying to bring everything back and connected to our plan. These are some of the accomplishments and priorities that we have. And again, I won't read those, but you'll see there's the leadership section, in the literacy section that focus on early literacy in particular, making sure that all of our children have the skills to be reading by the end of 3rd grade, and also our multi-tiered systems of supports. And they are probably we have one of the strongest systems, I think, around. We've done a very nice job with that over the years, and to bring us where we are now. But I believe that those 2 areas, our literacy and our social emotional work, are going to be more important than ever before as we head into the next school year, as we address kids getting back and addressing any gaps that they may have and the supports they need coming back in. As there's a lot of questions and anxiety in kids' minds, and we need to put them at ease, and this will be a big part of that. Next slide. These are the areas around instruction and social emotional developmental health, and we'll continue to keep the rudder deep in all of these areas. Next slide, please. And then family engagement and innovation. And if you remember at the last board meeting, we had gone through all of these, so I won't go back through them this evening, but they were here for your reference. And again, each one of the parts all together creates that collective experience for our kids. Next slide, please. So the federal stimulus funds, we wanted to put those up front. So the CRRSA, or the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, we received it. I'm going to say we've been allocated $4,149,807. that can be applied from March 13, 2020 to September 30, 2022. But something I want to say is I use the word allocated. It's not sitting in our coffers. It hasn't been set as a check. We haven't received those monies. There is an application process that goes along with that. And because it's a one-time allocation, and that's something that we need to remember. And there's a very specific allowable use list, and we're still working through that. There's a document that just came in recently. It's general, but it's also it's got a list of things. So we're waiting for the New York State Education Department template to come out, because oftentimes the template is more specific and really gives us a better example. So none of these funds are used to balance this year's budget, but I want to make that very clear that this is an allocation, and there's an application that goes along with this, and it's one-time money. So it's like if you use it once and you're looking to support something 3 to 4 years from now, the funding is no longer behind that. So every dollar that we spend out of this, we need to be very calculated that we're looking at how does it help us make the biggest impacts now in developing a sustainable future. So we have capacity down the road to be able to continue on with the strong programs that we have. So there's a balance with that, and making sure that things that can be used for one-time use that can be paid for, like technology, is a great way to go, as opposed to hiring or multiple staff with that, because then 2 to 3 years from now, we would need to figure out ways to support that staff or look at programming differently. And if we look at the next slide, the same amount of money, and you see that one, actually go back one slide. I just want to point out the difference in these two pieces. This one goes through September 30th of 22. Now think about this. We're in April of 21 right now. We're talking around, what is that, about 17 months. And this money will have to have been encumbered. So it's just something for us to keep in mind. So this one is March 13th, 2020, which is last March, through September 30, 2022. And again, we have not received the specific template and parameters on how to use that money. Next slide,
Brian,
please.
are you saying that money you said needs to be encumbered by that date? So it doesn't have to be spent, but it has to be designated for a purpose, correct?
Yeah, Kathy, can you chime in? And Dave, you bring up a great point, because that's the challenge we're looking at. Is it encumbered? It seems to be encumbered and allocated, but again, until we get that. Kathy, Nichols, is there anything you would add to that?
Just the guidance that we have seen uses the word obligated, and we don't have a definition of obligated. That might mean if you were making a purchase of Chromebooks, perhaps you've cut the purchase order. I'm not certain, so that's where we need to wait for the guidance. The important part here is that the New York State is saying that this is to be treated in the special aid fund, so it cannot be used in the general fund. So it is not part of the voter approved budget. So this is totally separate money outside of our normal budget process.
And was the amount that each district got determined by the state or the federal government? Do I have
It was based on the Title I allocations.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Kathy brings up a good point, the obligated part and the special aids. We actually just found out yesterday. There was a 2-paragraph memorandum that came out, and that's when the first time we had seen the CRRSA. It wasn't clear that if it was going to be allowed to be used in general or not, and now we know that it's special aids. So that was something, this is why it's evolving, but obligated is the word that was used this year. That was great that you shared that, Kathy. I knew I was forgetting a word, and that's what it was. The next slide, please. And then on top of that, with the American Rescue Plan, Fulton has been allocated $10,303,298. This one is applied through March 13, 2020 through September 30, 2023. And there's a possibility that that's extended to September 30, 24. But it's still gray. And you can see I did put at the bottom of the slide a little bit about that. And what they're talking about is you could spend up to 50%, but then you have to set aside 50%. So 12.5 per year equally over 4 years. If we don't receive it over 4 years, that would be changed to 18.75%. So in other words, we have to make sure that in years two and 3, or 2, 3, and 4, that it's extended over those times. So again, these are the types of things. Once again, application process. There is, I believe, a public aspect to both of these grants where you share publicly. We've brainstormed a list with our administrators and started going through things just in that first blush, trying to get an idea of some of those things that we would really make sure that we made to make some priorities as base. And I think we came up with about 2.5 to 3 million so far. And again, just a brainstormed list. So we're starting, and again, we would share that with community. We'd have to have public forums, I believe, is how that's set up. Again, there's some very specific parameters, but once again, one-time allocation, allowable use. But you can see even at the bottom, that paragraph I pulled out, they're even talking about, you know, to hold 50% of the district allocation. It didn't say who's holding that, by the way, which I thought was interesting. And then equally 12.5 or 18.75 at 4 or 3 years. So again, one-time allocation is going to be a great opportunity for us to build, whether it's infrastructure or build things that we have and set ourselves up. So this is going to be a really important time for us to be thinking not only in the present and how do we catch those kids up and close those gaps and provide every support that we need to do, but at the same time also thinking out 2 to 3 years and utilizing this money to set us up with a framework that we can look at 10 years from now and look back and say, wow, look at what these federal stimulus funds did for the Fulton City School District. And if we're able to do that 10 years from now, then we'll know that we use these efficiently and we maximize the opportunity. So I think that's where we're looking, and we'll see as the monies come out, what are those ties and those commitments that we have to make, and what are those very specific parameters, because once you get in it, sometimes it gets much more challenging and narrows the focus. So, but I'm hoping that there's the level of generality that we need to be able to be as creative and innovative as possible. Are there any questions to this point? I wanted to put the federal because it's very separate. And I think when you read in the press, you'll see that it gets kind of intertwined in. I received a phone call today or an email rather from the press wanting some feedback. So I'll call them tomorrow. We set up a time for our local newspaper, and the misnomers around that it just came into our general fund coffers and it's there is very, it's not clear to the public. And so we want to make sure throughout this process that we're very transparent about that. And then also, but I think you'll see that we're able to balance our budget closely without utilizing any of these. And there'll be opportunities for us to go back, and if there are some things that we have spent in general fund that are applicable, that we'll be able to move on to American Rescue Plan or the CRRSA. Next slide, please. Some highlights of the finalized budget. Our foundation aid, this is great news for the city of the Fulton City School District and other small cities. I mean, there's been a push for fully funding foundation aid for many years. There were cases back a decade where there was the campaign for fiscal equity and whatnot, really pushing to ensure that foundation aid formula was fully funded. The commitment in this year's final budget was that there is going to be fully funded. What does that mean? So this year, our total foundation aid is $36,744,000. That's an increase of over 1.426 million. Why is that important? Over the last 2 years, 1920 and 2021, our foundation aid has been flat, just about 35.3, and that's been flat. And so that's a concern because about 68% of our budget is dependent on state aid. So I think that's correct. Is that right, Kathy? I believe we're 68%. And so this is an important figure for us. So that is thrilling. The more importantly, and I don't believe I shared it with you, and I know I share the annual NISCUS easy to read state aid runs. They came in at the bottom of that run. It actually identified full foundation aid for us. So right now we're at 90.5%, and our projection for full funded foundation aid would be 40,599,000. So that's great news. that gives you kind of a ballpark figure based on the runs that I saw in the last 72 hours, I believe it was. So that's good news. And I hope that that number is a real number that will help us as we put together budgets and as we project what we can do for our kids in our district over the next couple of years. And again, lay that foundation for many years to come. The STAR funding was rejected. Good news, because it was confusing. They also rejected the governor's proposal to consolidate expense-based aids. And if you remember from previous conversations, consolidating them meant about a 375 to 415, 425 decrease for us. In the end, the number has come out to about an increase of about 375,000 more than that would have been if they were consolidated. So good news for our district. So, adding that to the 1.426 million with that, that's a much improved situation. If you remember back in November, December, our governor was talking about a 20% reduction in state aid. So these are totally amazing numbers compared to what we thought would be happening about 5 months ago. Pre-K, good news, back to full funding for us, $657,000. That's back to our original funding, and we are on the recruiting path now to get our pre-Ks out there registered and whatnot. We had a great conversation today with respect to that. So just like we plugged our parent university earlier, I'm plugging registration is now open for pre-K and kindergarten. So that's out there, and we're doing that. We have sent flyers and information to all of the physicians' offices, community agencies, really getting that out there that we are open and accepting registrations for 21-22. The acceptance of the guarantee of the low-cost broadband to low-income families. That's a great, just for all of our families across the state. Unfortunately, on the next bullet, the Fulton City School District Transportation Forgiveness Bill was removed or rejected once again. Although 4 districts were approved, we continue to work with the Assemblyman's office. I personally know one of the stories. It was a superintendent that I've connected with over the last 4 years since we started dealing with this. His district was actually approved. So I thought that was interesting, and I know their story, and it's almost identical to ours, verbatim. So it's interesting. We'll continue to move on that. So that still continues to be an issue for our district. And the 4% cap remains for unappropriated fund balance. In other words, our Senator Mayer she was the lead on the bill for 8% to be the cap. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to have moved, and neither did the Assembly's 6%. So right now, that's 4% cap remains. We're at 4.06%, I believe, is what we were at the end of last year, if my memory serves me correct. So, but again, good news on most of those bullets on that page. Any questions?
I just have a comment, Brian, and I would like to thank you and our state leaders, representatives for hearing our school district organizations as they talked about the challenges that we all faced across the state, and they came through for us to help us meet the needs of our students.
Yeah, more than we ever could have hoped for. And I thank you for acknowledging that. Our elected officials have done an outstanding job at the federal level as well as the state and local levels. So again, thank you. Dom, next page, please. So this is the budget we'd like to put forward, and I'll work you down from the top. This takes into consideration 0%. As you know, we always start with a 0 because that lets us know exactly where we're at. So with a 0% levy increase, if you work your way down, you'll see the state aid per the state budget. Our new number is $52,224,921. That includes that new foundation aid number, our BOCES, transportation, textbooks, so on and so forth, building aid, excess cost aid. That's the compilation of that figure. The next one, and we put the stimulus there just to show we didn't use anything. Originally, and this is a great example, back in February, if it had been allowed to be applied to general, a lot of districts were considering, do you place it there? We cannot do that. So that's why it's showing that, but there's zero out of that. And that won't be there when it goes to the public. But that would show you that initially, that's where, if you look back to February, that's what we had talked about. Other revenues, this is an important line. If you recall, we had talked about the pilots, and we had talked about the plant that's no longer the 350,000. Kathy, what's the name of it? I always block when I'm presenting the old Sunoco plant, but it is now called
Addis.
I'm sorry, the Addis. Now remember, that was a $350,000 pilot, has been reduced at this point in time, and that was notice that we received from the county, and we've discussed this at past board meetings. So that meant that that revenue line is down $350,000. So I just want to remember, and keep that in mind. The tax levy, so that means that is now $21,613,705. That's our current tax levy. That's what our levy was after last year's budget vote. That's our levy. So that's the base levy right now. And so just reminding you that we looked at limits and our limit this year is 3.04% before exclusions, and the limit with exclusions is 4.08%. And we have discussed those at previous meetings, but right now it's a 0%. This is a budget that does not include any planned use of reserves, no assigned fund balance. This is, if you've gotten used to the style of my team over the last couple of years, we always, our last two budgets, and even the auditors have been impressed, we have not used reserves or fund balance. The result is, and thank you to this board and the boards preceding you, dating all the way back to, I believe it was, '09 is when we had the Great Recession, and it took this district back to 2019 to actually recover and get our reserves and fund balance back. And the present board and the boards that preceded you have been a big part of getting our reserves. And now we're in a situation where we're in a difficult times in the world right now, and we're as poised as we possibly could be. So thank you. But that tax levy piece on this page is a bit of a concern, because that means that's $350,000 gap that we have. Now, if you drop down, we're proposing a budget of $76,230,000, and I'll show you in a moment how we got there, which leaves us a shortfall of $356,874. So I'm going to work us through another couple of pages, and then we're going to have a discussion about that 356. All righty, any questions to this point? Something I'm working on. I never stop and say, take a deep breath and ask if anybody has a question.
I was just going to say, I think it's important just to make sure the community knows that I believe when the federal legislation was approved and passed, that stimulus money cannot be used to lower taxes. So that kind of sets the stage for the conversation as to why that money can't fill the gap. Is that your understanding as well, Brian?
Yes, that's my understanding, that it cannot be used for that type of thing. It cannot be actually used to use the word supplant. It's only to use is supplement. So we can't supplement or supplant. So that's a great point. Yes, that is not, it cannot be used for those purposes. I heard one other question, I think, coming up. I wasn't sure who it was.
That was me, Brian. Nick.
Okay.
So the pilots dropped. At what point does that plant go back on the tax rolls?
Kathy, do you want to respond to that? I guess the answer is we don't know when that could happen, and we don't know if it would be filled in. But Kathy, do you want to speak to that?
Yes. Our attorney is looking, has talked to the county IDA, and is kind of looking after the school district's interests. But if the property, and I don't know at what assessed value, is added back to this year's tax rolls, when we go and do the levy in August, it would be part of, it would be part of the tax roll that is having that levy applied to. by not increasing the levy to take into consideration that this property would contribute tax dollars, it actually, and I think we showed that in an earlier board meeting where actually a 0% increase actually possibly could even decrease tax rates because of the addition of something like this. Because now the pie's being spread out amongst more taxpayers. So when it goes back on the levy, if we don't, when it goes back on the tax rolls, if we do not increase the levy, we don't gain anything from them. Because remember, the levy is the dollar amount we get, and we don't necessarily know who individually is paying that levy. Hopefully that makes some bit of sense.
No.
So Kathy, I'm a little confused.
Okay.
The 360 is the amount that's owed that they should have paid currently.
I believe it was right around 360. Yes.
Okay. And so the pilot has been nullified, and the property goes back on the tax rolls. We don't know yet what that amount is.
Right.
But going forward, it's my understanding if they fail to meet their property tax payment next year, or in the upcoming tax year, at some point we will be made whole by the county.
If that
on the taxes, not on the pilot.
Correct. Once it's on the tax rolls, that's the way the city and the county make the school district whole.
Right. So this pilot money, though, is money owed us that we planned on. Then we don't know. There is no time frame for when we may receive this money.
Well, the if and again, it would be speaking to the attorney to confirm. But if we are not, if the situation is that we are not going to receive the pilot dollars, and it goes back on the tax rolls, it just becomes part of the tax roll, and we don't collect additional money from them. We collect only what our total levy is from everyone in our jurisdiction. Does that make sense? Because the pie's the same size. Just because
yes, right. I guess I'm still confused. Again, the 360 stands as an outstanding bill.
Right.
Okay.
We may never see.
We may never recoup that. It all depends going forward. The last time this happened to the district, it took 6 years to recoup money that was owed from a pilot that was defaulted on.
Okay.
And it took a lawsuit.
Okay.
To make that happen. So, okay. But there's no guarantee that you're going to win if you chase it down. So right. The 360 is out there, and it's a gap for us that moves with us going forward.
Yes.
The only thing that changes is we don't know what the amount of the tax bill is going to be on that property, right. And it could be less than this street. It could be less than this or more. I don't know.
Yes, and we don't know what that is. But okay. All I'm saying is overall for our planning, we really aren't trying to say this. We don't really concern ourselves with who pays what.
Correct.
We concern ourselves with the total dollar amount of the levy.
Gotcha.
Who it's spread out to. I can't control what an individual taxpayer pays. I can only control what we levy.
Gotcha.
Or the board can only control what they levy. Okay.
That helps me. I don't know about Nick.
Yeah. Does that make more?
No, well.
The levy is what we get in taxes.
Right.
We spread it amongst everyone who's on the tax roll. If you're on the tax roll, you're going to pay a piece of it. The more people on the tax roll, the less your share is. So when we add this company onto our tax rolls, that means everybody if we don't raise our levy, it's possible everybody's going to pay less. because there's more people to pay.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not understanding that, but that's okay.
Well, Nick, what we'll do is I'll have a little
I'm not
summary
either.
written up. Yeah.
I'm not either. So
How about if we say it like this, Kathy? Let's think of it as we're sitting at a table with 10 people.
And
We
pizza?
all order, and only 9 people have money. So the 9 people are going to pay for the 10.
Right.
It's going to be spread out amongst the 9. At some point, the 10th money is going to kick in, but we don't know when. So, but we don't worry about it because the bill gets paid out of the 9.
Or think about this: if 2 more people join us at that table and we're eating a pizza, those pieces of pizza are going to be smaller, but it's the same pizza. It's one size pizza.
The amount's not going to change, is what she's saying. So the dollar amount is not going to change. The only change will be in how many people are kicking in to support the dollar amount. Does that help?
Yes, that's perfect, Robin.
Yeah, I understand now.
I-
I guess my thought was when we do a tax levy, if we decide on 3%, it's going to be 3% with everybody,
Correct.
No,
regardless of how many people.
you determine a levy dollar amount.
But you're right. You're saying we come up with a dollar amount first and then determine what the levy is going to be to cover that.
It's basically one and the same.
Okay, I think I got it.
An
Thank you.
increase, a certain percent increase relates to a certain dollar amount. And we hold it, and we know what that amount will be, as soon as you decide what you want to adopt for the budget. It's typical that you wouldn't make a change when August comes along, that you would go with that dollar amount.
Okay.
In a normal year, let's say without a COVID and without federal stimulus, if you have properties coming off a pilot, you would typically, when they get added, you would increase your tax levy to get that money that way, because they were paying it on pilot. Now, if you add them to the tax roll, you have to increase your levy to collect it that way. That's the part we're going to miss.
Okay.
So if you go 0, you're going to miss their share. They'll have a smaller share along with everybody else.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What we'll do is we'll put together a little summary for you as a reference as well. And we can actually publicly bring that up at the 20th meeting as well, just to make sure, maybe try to come up with a little simpler way. It gets talking and it gets kind of convoluted. So great example.
Now, I was just putting the percentage before the amount that we needed. So
Yep.
I understand it now.
not only that, we talked about a shortfall. So when you talk about a shortfall, what do you think? So
Yep.
that was the confusing part, I think.
Okay.
For me, anyways.
So right now we have a revenue shortfall. Let's just talk about a revenue shortfall right there at the bottom of that page. So, all right. So we'll put together a little summary or a graphic. But I think we've learned anything graphics or in simplified language when we could come up with something that, because it's not an easy concept if you're not living in it all the time. So if we're having that conversation, I'm sure others have the same question. So we'll have something for the next board meeting. So Don, make a note of that. I know you worked closely with our graphics and things like that. Next slide, please. Just want to walk, next slide, please. Let's start tax cap and summary over the 9 years. And if you look through, this just gives you that snapshot. You've seen this slide before, but we actually cleaned it up a little bit and put it in and typed it into the Google this year. So it just shows you from left to right. It gives you a historical perspective of our budgets since 2012, our enacted levies, our dollar increase over the previous year, the percent increase each year, the permissible levy cap in dollars, the permissible increase in dollars, and the permissible increase. So it just gives you an idea of kind of where we've been historically over time. The red, if you recall, in 17-18, our maximum tax cap was minus 1.74%. So we actually had a $357,000 reduction in our tax levy that year, and that was actually where we had to go. That was the least. So that's what we did. And then the last couple of years, you can see on the right there. And then if you just look at the actual levy growth versus the permissible growth, which is in bold, you'll see about a $1.2 million, $1.3 million gap between the two. But I think the budget over the years, all of these points have helped us, coupled with good budgeting, coupled with good budgeting management, has resulted in what you'll see on the next slide. Can you move on to the next slide there? Our fund balance and reserves. And you'll see over time, and this slide has been updated as well. It's a 3-year snapshot, 6/30/17 or June 30th, 17 through June 30th, 2020. You'll see reserve fund balance, assigned fund balance, unassigned fund balance over time, and our total fund balance. And the good news is you'll see it's increased over the years, and our total change in fund balance on the bottom right corner is $2.088 million. Really, the unassigned fund balance is $3,057,000. And Kathy, I believe we're at what, just over 4%, right at the 4% mark, correct?
Yeah, just over 4%. It's not even $100,000 over.
Yeah. So we were sitting in our maximums pretty much everywhere. But again, good news. And the capital project, if you recall, we removed $1.148 million, and that goes towards the capital project. So that's why that reduction. So it just allows you to see that we've built our reserves and our fund balances well over the last couple of years. And we haven't taken anything out of them with exception of the capital project, which we needed to do. So all good news there. So we poised ourselves well. Next slide, please. So the budget increase, the budget to budget increase from the 2021 to the 21-22 is 3.3%, or 2.53 million. If you remember, last year we reduced 2,048,000. I think last year we had a 0.39. It's based on contract costs, salary and benefits. We needed to add one 12 1-to-1 classroom based on needs. So that's a teacher and an assistant that we needed, teacher assistant that we needed to add to the budget. And this maintains all programs and supports. Next slide, please. The reductions that we made since you last saw something in February when we went through, we were able to move $350,000 in technology. That's an example of where we'll be able to move that onto one of those federal aids. It fits. We have a position elimination based on reduced student of need. That's the teacher of the deaf. We have a total, I believe, based on IEPs of 66 hours for the entire year. So we are either going to do that through BOCES or we're going to contract for that service. And that'll be a relatively minimal cost to provide that support that way. When that position was created a number of years ago, we had the need, but the number of students needing that service has declined. And therefore that position has been eliminated based on student need, based on individual educational plans. We reduced $100,000 from our health benefits costs. If you recall, and it'll be at our next board meeting, will be our monthly report. But if you're right now, knock on wood, our health benefits are for health services are actually right now running just under anticipated budget, right around 98.6%. 100% would be dead on, so we're just under, which is good news. Our dental are just over, I believe, at about 101, 102. So much better than last year at this point in time. So then if you recall the additions, I just mentioned the teacher and the TA, that's approximately $150,000 for that 12-1-1 classroom. So the net change is $455,000 from the previous proposal. Next slide, please. So that results in that $356,000, $874 current budget gap that we talked about in the shortfall in the previous couple of pages ago. That was with no use of reserves, no tax levy increase, or no federal stimulus funds, which we now know when we put this slide together, that shouldn't even be on there because we can't use it for that. Next slide, please.
Brian, can just one question about the 1211 increase, the need to
Yep.
add. Is that due to an increase of enrollment, an increase in designation, or students moving more restrictive?
It's actually a combination of both, Dave. We've had the students who've been coming into the district, we've tend to see, and I was seeing the same thing in where I came from a number of years ago. We were seeing more kids coming in special classes, in more restricted environments. We've seen that trend here in Fulton. A lot of the kids arriving here and enrolling for the first time. Also, I think we've had a little bit of an increase, but we have our continuum of services here. So, what I would say is I think it's a combination of both. We've had an increase in the types of needs internally as well as kids coming in.
Thanks.
Yep. It's a good question. Next slide, please. So there are a couple of gap closing options. I mean, one is use of reserves and going into our fund balance. We know that we're underspending the 2021 budget to this point in time. We're feeling pretty good about that. Kathy and I were talking, I think conservative would be probably at least $500,000, but again, things can always change through the end of the year, but that's probably being extremely conservative. But again, we're looking pretty good there. We'll continue to watch that and we'll present to you at the next board meeting on that. One of the options is obviously increase the tax levy or additional reductions. I know that was a question at the last meeting, just to give you, and then I'll give you what I would like to start the conversation with, and then we can go from there. But next slide, please. So just to give you an idea, if we were choosing to do this, 1% equals 216, just to give you an idea. And then on the next couple of slides, just to kind of what that means, if that were the direction we were to take, just for your information. Next slide, please. So on a 1% for a $70,000 home, it would be $877, $100,000, $1,535, or $150,000, $26.31 per year. And then on the next slide, this was after basic star exemption, and this was a 2%. Just to give you an idea, that was a question that we've had in the past. So I realized that when we shared that with you at I think 2 meetings ago, there was a whole lot of numbers, and these were the numbers that were actually in there. Now we've just pulled them out to show you what those were. It was a question that we received in the past. So we wanted to provide you a little bit more, graphic presentation as opposed to a lot of numbers and words. And I believe the next slide is at the end of the presentation. If it is, Dom, I want to go back the other direction. So if we could go back the other direction to the slide, one right there. So, go back. So there are 3 different options, President Griffin. Those are 3 options. Last year at this point in time, at this meeting, which was 1 meeting before we were going to make a final decision, we had an option A, which was we recommended option A last year was to use reserves to close that gap. And option B was to increase the tax levy. And then option C was to reduce the further. Last year, what we did was we reduced it down, and we also did a tax increase. So we did a combination last year to get there. So I'm going to recommend the use of reserves at this point in time. I think it's conservative. I think we're looking good. However, the piece that we have to continue to remember is that we always have that gap. That 150,000, I'll use that as the example of the 356, is money where let's say in this case, we were using reserves and fund balance to fund those 2 slots. I mean, that's a very simplistic way, but we'd have to think about that. We would have that hole in future years revenue-wise. So I turn it over to you. I don't know if I asked the right question the right way, or if I made sense, or if I'm just talking way too much. So I guess I would ask the board for direction. If you want, use of reserves would be my recommendation at this point in time. That seems to be a trend right now, but at the same time, we can look at, this is up for discussion.
Mrs. Lyons, I'll start with you. Do you have an opinion? What's your opinion?
Reserves. I would use the reserves.
Mrs. Abelgore.
I'm going to go with what the majority of the board thinks.
Okay. Mrs. Cooper.
If that's your recommendation, Mr. Palvino, I will support that for using reserves.
Mr. DiGiorno. Can't hear you, Nick.
Couldn't read my lips.
I couldn't.
No, I support using reserves.
Thank you. Mr. Crandall.
Reserves.
Mr. Cordone.
I just have a couple of questions. One, I'm wondering how Fulton compares to other small cities and to other districts in our county in terms of, I guess, cost per pupil. And I know that's just that may be an added data point to track. I wonder about, you pointed out the efforts that we've made to build the reserves. I wonder if somehow a combination of reserves and increase in tax levy might not be a better option or a viable option. I don't know. Just wondering at this point.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point, Dave. I think if we look back, I want to say it was a presentation in February or January. We actually had the cost per pupil. We are our cost per pupil tends to be less than small cities, similar school districts. It is significantly less than the overall state number per pupil. I don't have it right on the top of my head, but we actually have a slide in a previous presentation. So your point, I think, is we do have less per pupil expenditure than similar school districts, and for comparison to all school districts in the state of New York.
Right. We didn't compare in the county, Dave. I'm not sure how that would work if we're not looking at, if we're not benchmarking similar size.
Well, I think we might, there might be a way to do that is what I'm wondering. I know in Onondaga County, for example, they often do that. And it's helpful just to kind of see where, how the district that one lives in there compares to others. And the only reason I offer that is just to say, I wouldn't want us to kind of think that we can always default to tapping reserves. I think that if we can minimize, obviously, the full tax increase by tapping into some of it, but to totally use reserves, I'd prefer a combination of both. That's just my opinion. Thanks for asking.
And I appreciate that, Dave, because we've worked very hard over the years. It's a rolling, the reserves are a rolling thing. You're putting away and then you're using some, and that's the purpose. So if we were to get a comparison countywide, then shouldn't we also compare at the same time the wealth of each district as well as the student expenditure, so it makes more sense?
Sure. I didn't want to give Brian a lot of homework.
Well, I'm just fearful though, if we only do the one, the
Right.
snapshot would be skewed.
Yeah.
Even,
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, it's easy enough to get the cost per pupil for every district is actually on the NICED website. So that's an easy one to get for all the 8. The combined wealth ratios, I believe, probably are also easy to get. Again, that's a great point. We are the 3rd poorest district in I want to say at least the 3-county area, if not the 5-county area. We are behind a large urban district to our south, and then Hannibal, and then us. So we're, I believe, at 0.3. I believe it's 0.31. Average is 1.0. So we're at 0.31. So we're and I think you make a great point. I think in the past, if we're to show that slide with respect to our tax levies, we've been rather conservative, over the years. The last 2 years, we have a combination, maybe something. I wanted to start the conversation. Again, I am open to any conversation that you'd like to have, and because we have a week to bring it back and show you different numbers if necessary.
Yeah. Going forward, the one thing I am concerned about is, that pilot payment is gone, and yet we factored it into our plan when we thought we were going to receive it, and that money is gone. So that money is going to have to come out of something. We cut a significant amount of money from our budget last year, reduced our expenditures, which was some of it was good, some of it was okay to do because you did some right sizing, but some of it we made some very hard decisions as a district about things we weren't going to continue to do that we had been doing for our kids. So I just want to make sure that I say that I can support what you are asking, Brian, but I'm open to looking at what David wants to look at, and I'll look at that data, but I don't know where the rest of the board seems comfortable.
Yeah, I think what we also would do, I think I should have also said, I think we will continue to look at every expenditure that we can place on the federal that we can. So I gave example of the technology. As we dig in, are there other one-time costs? And I think that's the key here.
Yes.
One-time costs that it can't be FTEs, full-time employees. If we did full-time employees, that's when you get yourself into the challenge. And so, I think for us to watch our also that we're very consistent about managing our budget. We know that any needs for PPE or things that may come up in the past or forward, all can go on the federal grants. So we know all of that. We know that if there are some costs we can peel back that we can really work on making sure that we're underspending the budget. But you make exactly, it kind of goes back to what I said in the very beginning, which is 3 years from now, if it ends in 23 or 24 rather, the rescue plan, if it goes that far, that's it. And we know our foundation aid is going to go up a bit as well. That's the other piece, that if that promise comes true, that's in there that says we're going to get full foundation aid, we do know that we're going to close the gap. We also know that, it's interesting, if we had continued on the trend and you looked at that, if I know you've all had presentations with Rick Timms, who goes and he talks about you should always go to your tax cap. And if you did ours, we'd actually wouldn't have a budget gap if we had done that. Now, there were years, and again, it's just hypothetical the way he puts that, but it is interesting to see. So it does reinforce a combination as something that maybe it's good for the board to be considering having a conversation about.
For everybody that didn't see Rick Timms, though, what Brian is referring to is Dr. Timms encourages school districts to take as much of that were allowed, because you can't recoup that money in upcoming years. It's gone. You don't ever get a shot at those dollars to bring into your budget. And so over time, you actually leave what he calls money on the table that you can't go back and get. And that's okay if you're doing fine now, but his concern is when you look at the data, districts end up in trouble at some point in the forward years, and they wouldn't have been in trouble had they taken the money in those years that they opted not to.
Yeah. And if you want, on slide 16, which was the tax cap, you can actually see that over time. Don, can you pull that back up just for easy reference, just so we can just see it and what we're talking about? Thank you. And it's up a couple slides. One more, two more. There it is, right there. So that just gives you an idea, a snapshot over time on how we've done that. And so the last 2 years, we really were catching up with the minus 1.74 that happened in 17-18. We were actually recouping and getting that 357 that had been actually reduced and kind of building back. And you can see where our permissible increase was 408,000. And if you go to the left, that's actually what we did in 18-19, and then we did 566. If we hadn't done that, if we had done zero those 2 years, we would have $1 million less in our tax levy. So that's a great example. $1 million that's there every year. And that's a great way for me to explain. That's why I wanted to put it back up. That's why this slide is so important to demonstrate. So if you recall at a later slide in this presentation, 1% is $216,000. So you can see we had 408 with a 2.02. So you can see what we've done. So this is what I was hoping, that we'd have a really just good conversation tonight. about this, because you're right. Look back at 0.43 back in 16-17. You really, if you couple 16-17 and 17-18, those two maximum increases really hit us. The other piece, and Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, with the capital improvement and our debt service, I think we're projecting no higher than a 1.5 cap over the next 3 to 4 years. Is that correct? Cap?
Brian, I would have to look at it.
Yeah, I believe, and again, that's from memory, but we can provide that at the next meeting. But when we were doing some projections, our tax cap definitely will not look anywhere close to what it looks like this year, that 3 or the 4. And that's high. But what I'm saying is that it's just something to think forward with as well. And our philosophy has been the last couple of years to actually, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, actually go to our max, but 2 of our years were very low, which resulted in a lot of other issues in 16, 17, 18. So the last 3 years we've really spent trying to build back up to prepare ourselves in the event of, and that's what's happened this year.
Yeah, Mr. Polvino, I would just caution that, I typically, in a typical year, I would agree with Dr. Timm about not leaving money on the table. However, this year, in the middle of a pandemic, with small businesses struggling and families out of work, I would caution us raising that tax levy on our families and our community that's really hurting. And, the reserves, to me, at least, are really for this type of once in a lifetime, pandemic issue. So, I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in. I completely understand the data and the understanding, but we are in an unprecedented time this year, and our community is really hurting.
Yeah, I think I would say if the number was much bigger, I probably would have had a little bit different swing on this. And knowing that we've got those 2 federal pieces that we can work with, and if we're strategic, we can continue to work on making sure we're supporting our FTEs and those key operations, making sure those foundations are in place. But I would say one of the things we have to remember, I believe 1% was 216,000. That means over 2 years, or 2 years, I'm sorry, that's good, Brian. Over 10 years, that would be $2.16 million, $2.1 million that we left on the table over 10 years. I mean, it's an interesting concept to think about that over time. So it's just something, and dollars unfortunately mean programming, and so it's that long-term budgeting. So that's why, but I think that's why it's important to have this discussion. That's why we started with the federal, to make very sure, very clear that those federal dollars are one time and can't be used for the general fund. They're for supplement, but we will work to get as many things onto those that are one time and that do fit all of the allowable uses as well. There are many factors that go with that.
I want to say that I agree totally with Fallon at this point, that we have a lot of struggling families right now. And I think we really have to be mindful there.
Thank you, Don. I'm trying to keep track. I've got 6 dashes. I'm not sure if I may have missed one. Did everybody get an opportunity?
Well, what I had said was I would go with what the majority of the board is, but I didn't say, Mrs. Griffin, that I was comfortable using complete reserves. I kind of like having options as well. So I like what Dave threw out there. Keeping in mind that, yes, our community is going through a tough time with the pandemic, but if we shuffle the numbers around and maybe use both, we could still maybe come up with something not so detrimental where we're using all the reserves. But again, like I said, I will go with what the majority of the board chooses. Budget time and all this always makes me a little uncomfortable. So just throwing that out there as well. So that I might have been that dash you missed.
I was trying to keep track, that's all. So, yep.
Did anybody else want to weigh in with some additional thoughts? I know that everyone else supported you, Brian, but I didn't. Tim, did you have any additional thoughts or anything you wanted to share? Or Nick?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
I think Lynn and Fallon said it all.
Okay.
I agree with them. The
Yep.
county didn't raise taxes. The city didn't raise taxes. I don't think we should either.
Okay. Very
Yeah,
good.
just for
So,
the sake.
Ms. Griffin, do you want my team to bring anything back to the 20th or to the board prior to that? Or do we want to go with this? Obviously, we would change that slide and take that out of fund balance and reserves.
I would withdraw my request for anything additional if the majorities wants to use reserves, just to, not muddy the waters or add to your workload. You guys have a lot going on.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, I think this board has committed to stand behind your recommendation.
Okay.
So I don't think we have to do anything else, and we'll talk more, or we'll verify this on the 20th.
And I don't have to make this request, but I'm going to say it. Next year, I think we're on to with the monthly reports that we do. Those have become very important. And as we monitor our budget throughout the course of the year, making sure that we're keeping a really tight look on that budget on a monthly basis. I know we are, but you know how we've been doing that at the second meetings of the month? I think through next year and beyond, I think really being very clear about how we're maximizing the federal funds, how we're using those, and how we're poising ourselves for multiple years out forward. And I think we're going to continue to underspend the budget this year. So I think we're going to be poised for next year.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, then we will have an additional budgeting oversight document once we receive federal monies.
Yeah, what I would say, Robin, is that we have to talk about this, and it'll be interesting. I know that anytime you have special aid funds, and you'll remember the old ARA funds, right? From 9, 10, whatever that was, 10, 11. And there are the special aids, you have to do FS10s, you have to report back. I just think that for us to continue to make sure that we keep the board and the public apprised about how we're using those dollars, because I'm going to say, I'm not going to allow $1 out of that 14 million to go back or anywhere else. So we're going to try to make sure that we spend and plan. We plan and design to maximize opportunities for this community that lay the foundation for the future when they may not have that type of funding available.
It sounds like a good plan to me.
Yep. So we'll follow. I know that, and we'll be more with that. So, all right. So we will come back on the 20th with those new numbers. We will also provide you a 3-part budget. So you'll have that as well. We'll go over those things at the meeting on the 20th. We do have the budget committee this Thursday. That's the committee with our stakeholder group. So we'll go through that, get their feedback. That was one of their main questions. If you think about the budget committee, when we shared their feedback, was what would be the impact on taxes. They had some of the similar types of questions and discussion that we had this evening. So with that, I'm going to find my agenda here and see if there's anything else that I am forgetting here. All right. So, and with that, anything from my team that you would add? Did I miss anything this evening? With that, I'm going to stop talking and turn it back to you, Ms. Griffin. Thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
the board, for your support.
Would someone move 4.01, please?
Move it.
Second?
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJarme?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Elbegor?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Item 4.02.
Move it.
Second?
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJarme?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Elbegor?
Yes.
And Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Item 5.01.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJorm,
Yes.
Mr.
I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Elbegor,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons.
Yes.
Item 5.02, please.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJorm,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Elbegor,
Yes.
and Mrs. Lyons.
Yes.
Item 6.01.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJorm,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Elbegor,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you would like to batch 7.01 through 7.6. That would take us up to the coaching resolution.
Second.
Any discussion on item 7.01 through 7.06? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJorm,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Elbegor,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons.
Yes.
Item 7.07.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJorm,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Elbegor,
Yes.
and Mrs. Lyons.
Abstain.
Would you like to batch item 7.08 to 7.11?
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion on those items?
Who was the second? I'm sorry.
Me.
Thank you, Mr. Crandall. Okay.
If there's no discussion, Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJorm,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Elbegor,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons.
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons, would you like to kick us off tonight for board meeting?
Sure. I want to thank, I enjoyed listening to how we work with our library. Very, 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 I'm so glad we're included and they're included with us. And I'm so grateful they did well during COVID, especially with the ebooks. I'm so glad that people are still reading because I think it's very important. With the budget, I thank everybody for all the work you do. I don't always understand all of it, but you are simplifying it more and more as we go. So I understand it. And therefore, if I understand it, I think everyone out there can understand it a little bit better too. So thank you, Brian, very much for doing that, picking it apart. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Cordone?
I really don't have anything additional. Just thanks for the reports tonight. Thanks for the brief summary kind of the budget and the update. Thanks.
Mrs. Abelgore?
I just want to thank Brian and his team for going over the budget with us and making it easy for us to understand for the most part. It's always such a big task for me this time of year, and I appreciate you making it easier for me and the community. So thank you.
Mr. DeJarm?
Yeah, I'm glad the Parent University is getting off to such a great start. And I want to thank City BOCES for the beautiful thank you note that I received, along with the handmade items. I thought that was very gracious of them. Thank you.
Mr. May?
I just want to say it was pretty cool to see how the discussion happened with the budget and everything. It was kind of cool to see how that stuff works and how you guys make that happen. So thank you.
Mrs. Cooper?
I just wanted to discuss how my family particularly is enjoying Brambleheart with our One Book, One District. We're pretty well set through this book. So I just think it's a wonderful thing our district does. I'm so excited about it. I also wanted to give it a shout out to Fairgrave School. I understand Mr. DePointe's class did a pancake breakfast for the school district where they tapped trees, they made syrup and provided a breakfast to the entire school. I was very impressed and very excited to hear about that whole project and how it went down. And I just wanted to say how amazing our district is and our staff is. And that's it. And thanks everybody for your hard work.
Mr. Crandall.
Yes, everybody did great with their reports. With the stimulus money we get, I think I've solved what to do with it. I think we could pay each board member $1.3 million over the next few years. I think that makes it a lot easier on Kathy and Brian on what to do with it. So it's just a thought, and I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you. I would like to take a moment. Parent University, I have been impressed with what I've been able to look at so far. My thanks to Liz Tiffany for all of her hard work. It shows. I too have been enjoying Brambleheart. I couldn't wait to open it. It's been a lot of fun. It's really an interesting story and very well done. I'm glad that our district is able to take part in something of this magnitude. It really is special. I want to also thank the students from City for sharing their wonderful examples of the skills that they've learned. They sent us they sent us some items, things that they made, showing off for us their skills since we aren't able to go out there and visit. It's not the same as being able to visit, but it was nice to see the fruits of some of their learning. And I really appreciate it. If you could share that, Mr. Cordone, with the city board, I would be most grateful. I think most everyone here did enjoy it. I wanted to take a moment to say how excited I am. I saw an advertisement for Quirks Players. They're going to be doing an old time radio show. I'm very excited. I'm excited for to be able to be a viewer, to partake in that. But I'm really excited for our students, and I'm grateful for the staff that they were able to pull something together for our students that enjoy the drama aspect that we have to offer here in Fulton. So many, many thanks for getting that off the ground. And with that said, again, thank you to Brian and your team. Kathy, all the hard work on developing the budget, the extra work that's gone into helping break it down and help every one of us on the board and the community to understand to the best of our ability what the budget is about and how the budget is funded and how we're going to use not only local tax dollars, but how we're using state and federal monies. So thank you for that. It's a big undertaking. With that said, I am going to ask my colleagues if someone would move item 8.02.
Move it. Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. DeJalorme?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Alvagore?
Yes.
Mrs.
Yes.
Lang?
Yes.
Okay, 5-minute break, folks, and we'll come back and we have a piece of business to take care of in executive session. And when we're done, we'll come back out into open session to close the meeting. Thank you to those of you who joined us this evening. We really appreciate the time you take to learn about our district, and we're grateful for that. Hope to see you at our next meeting. I'll see y'all in 5 minutes.
Mrs. Cooper, can you
Mr. Wilson, are we all set?
Yep, go ahead.
All right, would someone move item 8.03, please?
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? So all those in favor, hold up a finger, hand, something. It's everyone's saying yes, 700. I thank you all. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow evening. Have a good evening tonight and enjoy your day tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.